Thanks for tuning in to the Drive On podcast, where we are focused on giving hope and strength to the entire military community. Whether you're a veteran, active duty, guard, reserve, or a family member, this podcast will share inspirational stories and resources that are useful to you. I'm your host, Scott DeLucio, and now let's get on with the show. Welcome back to the Drive On podcast. Today, my guest is Don Gleason. Don is a 27-year Air Force veteran who attained the rank of colonel and led units of over 1,600 people and was responsible for projects as large as the $12.8 billion Iraq reconstruction program. A little too much for me, but after getting out of the military, he's had a successful civilian career and has since started a nonprofit which helps military members who are in transition into civilian life. So welcome to the show, Don. I'm glad to have you on.
Well, thanks, Scott. I really appreciate it. And I appreciate the opportunity to be here. I always love talking about, what I do and how we're helping people. I think that's the key thing, right? Leaders help people. We're always focused on people. And that's what I love doing. And it's my passion at this point in life.
Yeah, absolutely. And it seems like it, and I'm sure we're going to get more into what it is that you're doing and how you're helping people, but it definitely does seem like that is your passion. So why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself and your background? I know I touched on a few things there, but I'm sure you have a lot more to fill in the blanks there with a little bit of who you are.
Yeah. So I'll try to keep it short because, 27 years plus 9, I think I'm almost 40 years out of college now. One thing I always focus in on people is I'm getting them to think about transition. And I do that on the civilian side with my for-profit and the military side with the not-for-profit is thinking about what you really want to do. And so my story goes all the way back to 5th grade. I was in Wisconsin, the first Earth Day in 1970. Gaylord Nelson was the senator from Wisconsin. He advocated for and got approved the Earth Day. And I remember sitting there in 5th grade thinking, I want to work in the environment. And that drove me all the way through high school, into college. I got my environmental engineer degree and I graduated in 1982. Unfortunately, I call it the Reagan Recession. It was the recession during his first term. Unemployment for a lot of people was 12 to 15%. For college, it was 20, 25%. Out of my graduating class, I was in the 85% that did not have a job after 4 months after graduation. So I looked around. I did not want to go back to grad school. And I said, what things can I do? Now I had 454 thank you, but no thank you letters from companies. So, and my wife had hand typed, we'd just been married 3 months at that point. She had hand typed every one of those letters, probably more than once, probably 5 times to make sure we got them right. Because there was no computers back then, 1982. And there was a big stack at my graduation party. So I joined the service and I said, 4 years max. No more. I just want to get some experience. But I got to do some really neat things in the military. I got into my first assignment. I was doing some of the initial documentation of old hazardous waste, hazardous materials dumping on the base, called it the Installation Restoration Program, kind of the civilian version or the military version of Superfund. And that was pretty neat. And then we found a trichloroethylene spill in the groundwater under the base. So I got to work with the United States Geological Survey to find it. So we were drilling monitoring wells and doing sampling and stuff like that. And even into my second base, I got to develop a hazardous material, hazardous waste staff assistance visit program. So I went around the base to the different shops, helping them manage the amount of hazardous materials they had, reduce the ordering so that we weren't generating so much waste. And I won a number of awards for that. Strategic Air Command at the time, environmental engineer, and then the Thomas D. White Environmental Quality Awards. So that was pretty neat. It started to separate myself from the peers. And then the career just kind of took off from there. I stayed in because I love the camaraderie, to be able to talk to the group, to feel like a team, to be together, to solve problems together, to party together, right? You always work hard, play hard. It just really enjoyed the environment. I resonated with the core values and the culture of the military and the Air Force. So I just kept on going. And pretty soon, heck, I commanded 3 civil engineer squadrons and then a mission support group. And if you're not familiar with a mission support group, it's like a brigade in the Army. It's the 06 Command. And in the Air Force, you have an operations group taking care of the planes, the maintenance, fixing the planes, medical, fixing the people, and mission support group, me, did everything else: communications, dining facilities, gym, civil engineering, contracting, supply, transportation, all of that. So it was a huge responsibility when you said in the intro, 1,650 people, 7 squadrons. But it really gave you a feel for leading people and delegating and trusting. And I really enjoyed it. It was really a lot of fun. And then finished my career at the Pentagon in charge of civil engineering readiness. And we did some really neat stuff. We had our 2-star general came in, and we were facing some budget shortages across the Air Force. And his feel was peanut butter spread is a lack of leadership. We are not going to come in and cut every program 10%. We're going to figure out how to do business differently. And he looked at me and he looked at my team and said, I challenge you guys to find some ways. And we did. We streamlined some things, how we changed risk management in the fire department, fire protection services. We did some emergency management. Came up with, now I can't think of it, AFIMS, Air Force Incident Management System, how we now directly related to the civilian in the same language, same structure, same organization titles. So we did a number of things that really helped streamline the operations, so we didn't have to do peanut butter spread cuts. And I thought that was really ingenious. And I learned a lot from him, but it really challenged me and my team to do some unique things. When I was in Germany, before I went to the Pentagon, and before I was in Group Command, I got to go to Baghdad. You said the $12.8 billion reconstruction program. They frocked me on the way down, which means I was a colonel select, but I hadn't pinned on yet. And it's fairly common in the other services, but the Air Force do it very rarely. But they wanted me to be a colonel in the position. So literally on my way to the airport, I stopped at the headquarters, and they did a ceremony and pinned colonel on me. And then I took off on the plane and flew down to Baghdad. But so that was a huge challenge. We might come back to that, because working some of the challenges there were just immense. The 3-star boss, about my first week in, he says, Don, I've been here 2 weeks longer than you have. We need to benchline the program. I want you to go figure out our costs, where they're at in the $12 billion program, and what some ideas that we can come up with to streamline it. He says, you got 5 days. I'm like, a $12 billion program in 5 days, and I'm brand new. So I got a team of people around me, and we found about $1.2 billion in efficiencies. And he had to go back and brief the Secretary of the Army on day 8, and then Congress on day 9 of us starting that effort. And it gave us a direction, and him a direction for his time there to streamline operations. So I really enjoyed the challenges that the military gave me, and the teamwork that I got to work with folks on. So ended up leaving the military in 2009 and started with Booz Allen Hamilton. And actually, we got to do then $3 billion of cost savings on a $20 billion nuclear facility maintenance contract, facility operations contract. It was at 2 different sites. And we with Booz Allen are running the cost efficiencies, and I got to lead that as well. So some really neat things. It's hard to cut them all down. I cut out a lot of stuff in my notes here because I just don't want to take forever. We could talk the whole time here, but just some of the excitement of things I got to do.
It sounds like you had quite an interesting career in terms of the different projects that you were in charge of, and having to sort of probably thinking on your feet and coming up with solutions to problems that you maybe didn't wake up that morning thinking, hey, I'm going to have a solution to this problem, by, short in, the next few days, or by the end of the week, or whatever,
or hours,
or hours in some cases, probably. Right. Yeah. And so I have to imagine that prepared you fairly well for your transition out of the military, because there may have even been some unexpected things that came up and required you to think on your feet in terms of your own transition out of the military. And I can only imagine that all of these experiences have helped you in helping others getting their feet wet when they're getting out of the military and getting into that civilian world. So I want to jump into that a little bit
Sure.
and talk about what you're doing with the Military Transition Roundtable, your organization there that helps
nonprofit.
yeah, the nonprofit that helps the veterans in transition, or the military members who are in transition to the civilian world. Where'd you get this idea for it, and how is it helping veterans that are out there as they're making their transition out?
Yeah, great question. Where it came from. So a partner and I, Matt Shear, we formed it and came up with the idea in December of 2019, just 2 or 3 months before COVID. And what was neat is we had been working together doing some different things, and we'd been working independently for a couple of years supporting military. And neither of us were really happy. I find if you can follow the energy inside of yourself, the interest, are you excited when you're doing this or not? And I was doing some different things. In fact, I joined one nonprofit, and she CEO had me briefing how to write a resume. I'm like, I don't want to write resumes. That's not my excitement. That's not the real value I bring. When we were sitting at another event, and the CEO of the nonprofit that was running it, we were just there helping as coaches. She said, don't transition alone. And what she meant was, there's plenty of resources and people out here to help you. But my partner and I looked at each other and said, there's no organization that brings the team of people together to work together consistently over time. And I had just been, I think I probably was completing the 3rd run through of the book, Think and Grow Rich. If you're not familiar with Think and Grow Rich, Andrew Carnegie commissioned Napoleon Hill, a professor at the University of Chicago, to interview 20,000 people over 20 years, 500 being the most successful people: Woodrow Wilson, Teddy Roosevelt, Albert Einstein? No, Thomas Edison, excuse me. Andrew Carnegie himself, Henry Ford, Charles Schwab, all these guys. And he found 13 success principles. And one of them was the mastermind. Mastermind is nothing more than like-minded people coming together for a common purpose. Back then, it was CEOs coming together because they couldn't always talk in their company. They wanted to think about things in a broader perspective, take advantage of everybody's skills and abilities and knowledge and experience. And that's what we do with the military. We started, now we're running 6 cohorts. Each cohort, 8 to 10 people. We meet every other week for 6 months, and we just bring issues forward to the group to take advantage of knowledge, experience, whatever, to bring to thinking partners, to bring advice, to help overcome issues. Imposter syndrome is a big issue, right? We're coming out of the military, and it's like, I've never done that job before. How do I rack up with that? You start to doubt yourself. Well, heck, just look what I did in the military. Can I do that same thing in the civilian sector? Yeah, you bet I can. But we start to doubt ourselves because it's a different environment. So we help people walk through that and realize how good they are, what they've done, the challenges that they've taken on. And we've achieved some incredible success. One metric I want to talk about. We've had, in the 2 years, just finishing 2 years, we've had 53 folks graduate, meaning they went through the program and they got the job they were looking for. Now, Syracuse University Veterans Center did a study and said 45% of military leave their first post-military job within 12 months. Almost half the people will be looking for a job within 12 months. Our group so far, as we were looking through that, about the 24 people, only 12%, 12 people that have been in a job at least 12 months, only 12% of them, 4 times less, have been leaving that job. Because we focus in on values and culture and leadership, and what things fulfill you in that job. So you're looking at that through the interview process. Don't just take a job to get a job. Take a job because it's going to fulfill you and excite you. And I think we're finding that we're having some success there. So we need much more data. But that's really what we're doing in the Military Transition Roundtables. We're leveraging the roundtable or the mastermind to help people walk through that process together. And man, once you find out that I'm not the only one who's having trouble with this, it kind of gives you some camaraderie, gives you some warmth that I'm not in this alone.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And, I know the benefit of the mastermind. In my business, I'm not currently in a mastermind, but in the past, I've been in a couple of masterminds where other business owners would come together and we'd meet, whatever it was, weekly, every other week, whatever the time period was. And we get together and we talk about issues that we're having in our business and how other business owners would handle the problem. We just try to help each other out, give some ideas. And, we're not necessarily competitors, direct competitors with each other, but some of the issues that we have are issues that any business could have. Mm-hmm. And so it's nice to just be able to bounce some ideas off of people. Right. That's right. And so the same idea, I think, with transitioning out of the military, I mean, how many people are transitioning out of the military on an annual basis? There's so many people. Right. And
would you believe the number is 200,000 per year?
Wow. 200,000. I didn't even have a grasp on how big of a number that is, but that's a huge number, right? Mm-hmm. And all of those people are going through something similar, or many of them are going through the exact same thing where maybe the military was their only job from the time they turned 18, and maybe 20 years later, they're getting out of the military. They've never written a resume. They've never gone on a job interview. They don't know how to do the interview process or apply for the jobs or what to even put in a resume. They may have heard the word bouncing around, but they don't know what to put in there, right? And then even translating your military service into what does that mean to a civilian employer? You're not going to load up military acronyms in your resume, because that's just going to be way over their head. They're not even going to read that, right?
That's right.
So having a group of like-minded people who are going through something similar at the same time, maybe they have gone through there. Maybe one of the people is a little bit further ahead in the process than somebody else, and they can help each other out. And honestly, with the military, I don't think I've ever met a group of people that is more willing to help other people in that same community, that same group of people, than I have with the military. Right. You have I've seen on social media, there's a veteran who's in Omaha or somewhere, and they reach out to their battle buddies who were in Florida or something, and it's like, hey, I need some help with something, and they put out this search for this help, and all of a sudden you got like 10 veterans sitting at this guy's door, and they're like willing to help out with whatever, because that's just how it works.
That's right.
And so this idea of this mastermind coming together and helping each other out, I can't think of a better group of people to get together, right, to do that.
Yeah. Here's an important piece of this, that feeling of being alone. Mm-hmm. There's some, I've been doing a lot of research on different studies, and they show that I can't remember it exactly, but it's like half of the ideations for suicide come up during transition. And it's that feeling of being alone, right? Ever since we joined boot camp or basic training or officer training school, academy, we always did it together as a team. And then all of a sudden, when you decide to transition, if there's not somebody right around you, you're transitioning alone. Mm-hmm. And you go to these programs and you get this stack of books and all this material, and you're trying to sort it out. And you've never done it before, like you said. It's like, it's overwhelming. And there's a story of a gentleman here in town, San Antonio, Ray Domingo. And his wife had to pull him out of his office at one point. He was falling into depression. He wouldn't come out of his office. He was just so depressed that he wasn't achieving things. And he was the spray and pray method of resumes. He just wrote one and he'd just shoot it out to 10 or 15 a day, not targeting it to companies. And he wasn't getting any success. And that's an unsuccessful method. So his wife had to pull him out, and now he leads LinkedIn Mill City here. It's a big networking event. He leads the Key, Key. And so he's really engaged. Now he's a recruiter for various companies, as is his wife. So they're really engaged in helping the military. So he's taking advantage of that frustration. And that's what we're trying to do, is how do we help those military members and spouses? We work with spouses too, who are frustrated in the process to the point of depression, to the point of suicide. 22 veterans committing suicide a day is a real number. And I heard somebody say that's all we can validate. There's probably more. And that's an incredible number. And we got to stop that. And this is our way, Matt, Shira, and I, this is our way to make an impact on that.
Yeah, and I think any efforts that are working towards chipping that number down closer to zero is definitely worth celebrating and worth talking about. And this is one of them because, like you said, if you're going through this alone, first off, you're not alone. There's like you just said, 200,000 people are transitioning out of the military every single year. So you're definitely not alone. Probably there were maybe even a few thousand people the day that you got out who are getting out too, right? So it's just crazy to think that you should just struggle and suffer through it alone. And the other thing too, with that transition is that loss of identity.
Yes.
You were an airman, you were a soldier, you were a Marine, a sailor, whatever you were for all these years. And then all of a sudden you take off that uniform for the last time. And now what are you? Now you have no identity. But you do have an identity, and it's just a matter of picking up those pieces and figuring out where that next piece is going to come in. So we talked about a few of these difficulties, this going it alone, and that self-doubt, and all that kind of stuff. Are there any other like major difficulties that people have when they're transitioning out of the military? Things that are really holding them up when they get out?
I want to touch on what you just said. I think identity, I've been really trying to think into that, because that 45% number, and some people say it's 65% of military leave their first post-military job in 12 months. That number it gets me. And it's like, what's the cause of that? And I love what you just said with identity, right? We're the rank, we're the service, we're the job title. And so many of us tie our self-worth to those items. And the military has created us that way. So I keep thinking sometime I want to get out and start talking to the leadership of the military. Being a colonel, maybe I can get in there and get away with it, we need to think about the implications of our training. I get why we do it, to make us the best soldier, sailor, airman, Marine, Coast Guardman, public health in uniform that we can be. I get it. But it has ramifications later of once we leave, it's that ego, it's the identity. And in fact, there's even a second word I want to touch on, which is loyalty. Why do military not start their transition until they're sometimes 3 months out? People say it takes you 2 years, and it does, because you got to think about, what do I want to do next? And you got to go talk to people and network and do informational interviews and really understand, is that really what I want to do? And then you start researching the position descriptions, and then you start writing your resume and your LinkedIn profile about 10 months before, so that at 6 months before you can start doing interviews and getting ready. And it takes a while to work through the process. But because of the loyalty, we feel disloyal if we start thinking about a civilian job before we're almost to the end. And even in those last months or so, the pressure from the boss to finish strong. And I get the mission's got to be done, and we don't have enough people, we don't have enough money. I get that, but it also means that we're sacrificing. That time is going to happen, whether it happens when they're on the military duty or afterwards. And if we don't start it till at the end, that means they're unemployed for X amount of time. Right. And if Dave Ramsey, the statistics he used are right, and I think they are, that most people have never said at age 50 have never saved more than $50,000. Half the population doesn't even have $50,000 for retirement at age 50. It's like, we are way behind the power curve, and that has a big implication. People start taking jobs that, not to downgrade Walmart or something like that, but they start taking whatever job they can find at Walmart or Starbucks or whatever, just to get checks coming in. And maybe that's part of the 45%, because they hadn't thought about planning. So anyway, 2 key words, identity and loyalty, that I think are important to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. And that loyalty, the way you were describing it made this image pop in my head. and I wanted to just say this and get it out there. The military is not like the mafia, where if you are thinking about getting out of the mafia, you're going to end up with concrete boots and, you're swimming with the fishes, right? And so like, it's not like that. And like, we understand as part of the whole process, people are going to leave the military at some point in time. Like, you're in it now, and it's not a lifetime thing for most people. Right. Most people are going to get out. So there has to be that next step. It's not a lifetime commitment like the mafia is or whatever.
Yeah. And in fact, there's a figure there, right? You said most get out. This is a kind of a crazy question, but what's the percentage of people that get out of the military? 100%.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the people who I'm referring to are the people who, maybe they were killed in action, or things like that. Those are the people who they're not getting out. Like they stayed in, and they're into their last day, right? But for the most part, most people are getting out at one point or another, and you really have to plan for that, right?
Yeah, but it's interesting how many people, even at 25, 30 years, they're thinking, oh, I'm surprised I'm leaving. I didn't think I would leave the service. I thought I would stay in for a while longer. I thought I had more time to plan. And it goes back to that loyalty piece again, but it also goes into kind of an unreal expectation. If you don't die on active duty, right? Or in Guard and Reserve, you're going to get out at some point. And we need to be thinking about that. I always say that I started planning 24 years in advance. Why? Because when I was coming up on captain, I didn't plan on staying beyond captain. I went to the Military Officers Association of America, MOA, their career transition workshop. I started building my resume. I was doing all those things. I was starting to do networking. I got involved in this group over here, the Society of American Military Engineers. I advocate everybody find a professional association. That, in fact, the most successful transition, even better than mine, is a guy named John Knotts. I want to shout out to him. 10 years, he was in Air Force manpower, and he figured out what he wanted to do, what his mission and purpose was 10 years before getting out. And he started associating with different organizations and learning the civilian language and meeting people. And when he got out, there was a job waiting for him. And he's been always able to rely on that. So I don't think he did any less work, less dedication to his work in the military, but he was thinking about himself and his future. And I think planning is important. Planning is important of how we approach our life. But I used, before we started talking, I used the quote, from Carl Jung: 2% of the people think, 3% of the people think they think, and 95% would rather die than think. And all he's saying is 95% of the time, we're existing in habits. We drive to work without thinking about it. We drive home, we walk down the hallway, we go into the kitchen during a commercial break. All these things just happen because they're habits. When we really stop and put the conscious part of our mind into action and thinking and coming up with new concepts and new ideas, that's that 5% where we're really engaging the brain. And we just don't do it that often. So it needs to be an intentional process. And I think that's why it's uncomfortable, because we've never done it. I was blessed. I didn't think I was blessed at the time. I was blessed when I was coming through, because I had to write a resume for my chief of operations as a major position, my 2-3 squadron commander positions. In fact, I remember my 3rd squadron commander position, secretary popped her head around and said, I was heading to the Pentagon. And she turns around, I was on the squadron commander list. She comes around the doorway and said, Colonel Eakin from Malmstrom is on the phone, wants to interview you for this Space Civil Engineer squadron commander job. And I'm like, I got 10 seconds to prepare. It was like, holy cow. But I had my resume, I'd been working my star bullets, I had been prepping through all of that, knowing what I wanted at the time. And I did a really good interview, and he says, hey, Don, he says, when can you get me the resume and the cover letter, so I can show it to the wing commander? I really like what you're presenting to me. And while we were talking, I had already been typing a few things, and I changed the header, I changed the headline on my resume, I changed the cover letter, and I went, boop. I said, sir, it's on its way to you. And on the background, I hear this beep. And he looks down and he goes, there it is.
Yeah.
Wow. He says, all right. So, but just having things ready and easily accessible and planning was so important. And I think we need to do the same thing as we're transitioning out. We just need to be thinking about what we want and not the last 30 days, 90 days.
Yeah. And, when you were talking about that 2% of people think, 3% think they think, and 95% would rather die than think. It just brings me to, just everyday situations, with my kids. I have 3 young kids, and every once in a while they'll do something that they don't have an explanation for. It's like, why did you do that? And the answer, I don't know. I don't know why I did it. Right. And so like that, I feel like that falls into that 95% category, right? They just weren't thinking, right? They're smart kids. I'm not trying to take anything away from them, but just sometimes they just have that brain fart and they're not thinking, right?
That's right.
And so I think that, a lot of us probably go through life just kind of coasting, not really thinking about what it is that we're trying to do, what we're trying to accomplish, our goals and things like that. But then I mentioned this before we started recording. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. And so if you're not happy with where you're at with your career, with your finances, with whatever it is that you're not happy with, and you're just doing the same thing over and over again, it's not going to change. You're going to end up with the same result over and over again.
That's right. That's right. So, I want to touch on this painting right over is that my left shoulder?
Sure.
It was neat when I was talking about before we started Military Transition Roundtable, I was involved in another group, and part of that 2.5-day workshop was like painting with a twist. So we brought in a painter with a company, and they put a painting up front and they walked us through step by step. And this one's really cool because it's the American flag, and it's not meant to be, clear, precise, lines. It's meant to be kind of blurry with the flag, and then there's a tree, and then there's some ground shrubs. And I was doing really, really well until I got to the ground shrubs. And I just sat there and looked at it. And I was like, I don't know how to do it. And I was trying to paint the shrub from the top down, and it's very narrow to wide. And I was trying to imagine how you do that with a brush. I could not figure it out. I walked up to the instructor and I stood there and looked at his painting, and I talked to him. I said, I don't get it. I don't know how to do that. What do I do? And he goes, you just do this. And it was interesting. He was using the brush stroke. And I was like, I'm not following. So I walked around the room and I'm looking at other people doing it. And I'm just like, I don't get it. And I sat back down. I stared at my painting. This is like a 15-minute time frame. I was just stuck. And all of a sudden I said, well, I really like my painting at this point. I can always do another one. So if I ruin it, let's just do it. And I took the brush stroke from the bottom up, the important part, and I did it. I was like, I did it. I did it. And I started doing it again and again and again and again and again. And pretty soon I almost had too many shrubs. But it really signified to me being stuck. And too many of us, since we've never written a resume, you sit down and it's like, I don't know what to write. You get on your LinkedIn profile. I don't know what to write. Go back to that important question. What do you do next? I don't know. And you get literally stuck and you don't know where to go next. And that's, again, the power of that mastermind is thinking into it. And we, my partner and I, we also do one-on-one coaching with them. So I really focus in on the what next piece and take them back through their life. What did you really enjoy? What brought you energy? What things didn't you enjoy? What things were just, it was agony to do that. And we dig into those things. And usually, and I never tell them what to do. I let the results of their thinking come back and say, I see what you're doing. I think what I really enjoy is this. I said, so tell me a little bit about that. What's behind that, right? The power of the what question, not the why question. Why questions make them defend it. The what question makes them think into it. So tell me what's behind that. And pretty soon they're thinking more and more into the energy, excitement, and you can see it on their face. So we were talking to a guy last night in 4-block, and he talked about this job. He was getting a job offer with Amazon, and he just lit up every time he talked it. And it's like, it's pretty obvious that's the job for you.
Right. Right.
So I just I wanted to mention that painting because it's so important in the process to recognize it and not be afraid of it, not hide it, but when you find yourself stuck, get some help. And that's why you need people around you. Go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when you get stuck, first off, having those people around you who can help you get unstuck is really important. Um, because like what happened with you, you're walking around the room trying to see how other people were doing it. You're trying to get some ideas, even though you may not necessarily have been tapping everyone on the shoulder and saying, "Hey, what are you doing here? How do you make it look like that?" Right? You were just going around, you're observing, you're taking a look at it, right? And so you're absorbing some of that information, and you may have not even realized it, but you may have seen somebody else in the room going from the bottom up, and then just subconsciously you sat back down at your painting and you're like, oh, well, let me just give this a try, and boom, there it is, and then it worked, right? So having those people around is really important. But I think also there's a saying when you get so stuck on something, you get this analysis paralysis where you
Exactly.
just are just stuck on something. Sometimes it's helpful to just do something. If you're stuck writing a resume, write something. Just put something down, because you can always improve upon that, right? If you're doing it in Microsoft Word or something like that, that's not like you're etching it in the tablet, in a stone tablet, right? You can go back and delete stuff and put new stuff in
That's right.
and fix it. You can always improve upon it. So start something.
Start with something.
And that's, I mean, what I've told people with a lot of things, with things like artwork, like you were saying, like if you want to see if artwork would be helpful for you in terms of like a therapy kind of thing, well, pick up a paintbrush and start painting something. Or if you want to write something, you want to write your memoir or a book or something, I don't know where to start. Well, just start. Just write something. And you can always expand on it from there. Maybe what you're starting with is the middle of the book, but it doesn't matter. Just start something, and then you can move on from there. But I think the same thing with the resume, with other things that you might be doing. Just start something, and then you at least have something, and you can go to somebody else who might be a little bit more advanced in the resume writing process than you are, and you can say, okay, help me with this. Because if you come to them with a blank piece of paper, it's going to be a whole lot different conversation, right?
That's right.
So,
I was just looking for something in some notes. I was just at a John Maxwell conference, and he has, oh, here it is. Perfect. I'm right on the right page. And he has a five-step process for this: test, fail, learn, improve, re-enter. And if we, just like you just said, just test it, just try something. And once you've tried it, you're going to fail. Yeah, every one of us fails, right? First time John Maxwell spoke, he's the highest paid non-celebrity, non-entertainment speaker. I mean, we're talking like $120,000 an hour. It's how much, it's incredible. But he said he wasn't comfortable till he spoke 5,000 times. He's written 86 books. He says the first 10 or 15 are junk, comparatively, but he just had to get started. So, test, fail, and know that failure is not final. Learn from it. And he talks in here about there's good misses and bad misses. Good misses are when you miss and you learn from it and you can re-enter in the process. A bad miss is when you start making excuses and you blame everybody else and you don't learn. And therefore, you can't re-enter, right? So test, fail, learn, improve, try it, and then re-enter. So I had to pull that out because I thought that was so important to what you were just saying, is just take action and have that mental process. He's writing a book called Return on Failure, and that was part of his discussion when we were at the conference. It's neat when we're there because I don't think we said yet, I'm a John Maxwell team member, now Maxwell Leadership Certified member, executive director with that group. And when we go to the conference, and that was my 12th, we get to hear him talk about the things he's thinking about, that he's writing in his books before he publishes it. And it's just amazing stuff. I start using it and thinking into it. It's awesome.
Yeah, and that's a good way of thinking of it too, because you're right. We do fail at pretty much everything that we've started, unless unless you got lucky, right? That first time that you were trying something, you didn't do it perfectly. You didn't execute it perfectly. That's why when you're young, there's driver's ed classes, so you can learn how to drive the car. That's why, your parent was holding the bicycle as you're riding it, without the training wheels, so that you can learn how to do that, because inevitably you're gonna fall, you're gonna fail. And but you learn from that. It's like, okay, well, you don't lean too much to that side because you're gonna fall, right? And you learn, and then you get back on the bike, and then you do it over again, and you succeed, and eventually you're able to do it. And that becomes a lifelong skill, and that you just don't even think about later on in life. It's just something you do, right?
That's right.
One question I had for you. So
sure.
A lot of jobs in the military have parallels in the civilian world. There's a lot of things which make it easy for people who enjoyed what they did in the military to think about what they want to do next, right? So, but there's also some jobs. I was an infantryman, for example, so I'll use that as my example. But they don't exactly have a direct correlation to a civilian job, right? That there's not a whole lot of infantry jobs available for the civilian sector,
market.
Right, exactly. Unless you're a mercenary of some sort, and that's a whole nother conversation. But but other service members may not have even enjoyed what they did, even if there is a direct correlation to their job. They may just not have enjoyed it, and they may not want to do anything like that, right? So, what advice do you have for those people who are struggling to determine what they want to do next, what those next steps are for them?
Yeah, that's a great point. And I love the way you use the word, not a direct, job on the outside, right? But I think a lot of the skills indirectly help. So which ones do have direct, an engineer like myself, a lawyer, a doctor, all those, that transitions pretty quickly. But infantry, tank, even a C-130 pilot, you can fly, but it's a different type, right? F-15 pilot, there's no jets on the outside necessarily, unless you're like a Learjet, but you're not doing combat. So, but you take those skills. So what I did is, here's an example of my story, and I think what we need to do is, the idea is to break down the skill set that you used and see how it translates. Look at the job you've done and the job you want to do, and break them down into lower level skills and see how they relate, and then build it back up again. So my example is, I joined Booz Allen Hamilton as my first job and my only corporate job. I stayed there for 9 years. And why? I'm going to go back to what I said before about, I understood the culture and the values and the leadership style I work best with, and those type of things. And I found a match. I found a really good match. But it took me some time and effort. But my first day when I got to Booz Allen, the boss said, I don't have a project to put you on right now, but we are doing this. We do the assessments of all the people, 25% every quarter. So for the next 3 days, I want you to sit in the back of the room and observe the process, because you're going to be, deep into the process next time sitting at the head table. I said, great. So it didn't take me about an hour or two, and I figured out the process, right? For each person, 5 minutes, two minutes looking backwards at the last year, 3 minutes looking forward to how we can develop that person. When are they ready for promotion? When are they ready for the next job? What things do they need to do to close that gap of where they're at to where they need to be? And I started looking at myself, and I said, let me look here. So during my Air Force 27 years, pretty good communicator, went through 3 professional military education schools, did a lot of speaking. I mean, one of my last jobs, I was speaking in front of 2,000 people at a conference. I was in charge of the conference. So I got over that fear of speaking, so pretty good speaker, pretty good writer, pretty good leader. I went through a lot of that stuff, but I said, what I don't know is these other things. I don't know how Booz Allen does business development. I don't know how they write proposals. I don't know how they manage risk. I don't know how they manage finances. So I started coming up with a plan, and I went and found people to help me through that. And I think if we take that same approach and we start looking at, what skills do I have? Which am I good at? Which am I not good at? What are the requirements over here? I'm probably pretty good at those. I'll maybe not be so good at those, and start building it back up again. So that can be part of the process of planning to figure out what you want to do, right? If you are, and I always put in the DISC behavior analysis or personality indicator report. I don't know if you're familiar with DISC, but
I've heard
D's
of
are,
it before. Yeah.
yeah, real quick. D's are demanding, I's are influencing, S are steady, stable, and C's are compliance. So D's love to be in charge. They love results. They're high level thinkers. Don't give them a lot of detail. I's love to talk. They're influencers. They're usually the life of the party. They're in the center of attention. They like to be recognized. S is very teamwork, collaborative. They don't like change. They're slow to change. They just need to understand the process, what's going on. And C's being compliant, they love regulations. They love analysis. They're usually right when they make a recommendation because they've done all the work. Or D's, a lot of times they do it off their gut. And so if you understand a little bit more about the personality of the individual, ourselves, that tends to lead us into certain jobs that we're really good for. And then we look at the behavior and the energy and see, okay, I've been in that job or something like that. Did I enjoy it? I was using that skill. Did I enjoy it? Did I mind thinking? So it's kind of a puzzle that you put together when we think about figuring out what it is people want to do. And usually we can come up with something. And a lot of times it has a pretty good stick to it. So I hope that makes sense in terms of, I went around some things there, but it's not just looking at the direct, but looking at the indirect piece of how it relates.
Yeah, and I think I intentionally use that word, that direct correlation.
I thought you did.
because I know that there are a lot of skills that the military gives you that can relate to other civilian jobs, and even someone who was infantry or artillery or something along those lines, that there's not really a direct civilian correlation there. There are some things that will correlate, and some of the leadership skills and some of the other skills that you have picked up and acquired along the way throughout your career that will help you get into these jobs, right? And one thing I think that a lot of service members shortchange themselves with is their ability to learn new things. So when you want to get out of the military and transition into something different, maybe you didn't enjoy the career that you had in the military, the job that you had, and you want to do something different. We all went into the military, for the most part, I would imagine, not necessarily knowing our military job, but we all learned it along the way. We have that ability to learn things. So maybe you're not going to be completely happy with doing that same thing when you get out of the military, but you can always figure out a way to learn some new skill, some new trade, a new job, a new whatever. And some places have that on the job training where you can learn it as you're going along, or you can go back to school. A lot of people have the ability to use the GI Bill and use that to further their education and learn new skills and things like that. But we all have that ability. We did it at one point, so we can do it again, right?
I was just sitting here thinking about the number of jobs I've had, 22 different jobs, if I'm right in that area, during my 27 years. 15 locations, but 22 different jobs. And you're exactly right. You had to learn every time a different responsibility. Yeah. Most people don't get to do that. That's a skill in itself, of being able to take advantage of what you learn, now learn the new skills, apply and continue to develop. And sometimes, again, we talk in John Maxwell team, sometimes you have to learn and unlearn to relearn, because what you knew 5 years ago and how you did that job doesn't serve you in the next job. So you have to unlearn it and relearn it.
Yeah.
And those are important skills. And I think you're exactly right. I mean, it doesn't matter if you're just an infantry. I don't like the word just. If you're an infantryman or a tank driver or a pilot, and that doesn't have a direct, there are ways to take those skills and look at what you can do.
Yeah, absolutely.
They're all valuable. Great point.
Yeah, absolutely. And as far as networking, so I know the military roundtable, that's kind of part of the deal is you're working together in this kind of collaborative effort, right? But For people who want to get into a specific industry, maybe before they've even gotten out of the military, I think you were mentioning some professional organizations and other things like that. What's the best way to start getting involved with some of these organizations, or even getting to know some of the people who are involved in these industries that you might want to get involved with? And I know I'm talking kind of general terms, because I'm not talking about any one particular industry, because there's a whole slew of industries that are out there. But what's the best way for people to start getting involved with that kind of stuff?
Yeah, and let me jump into where it fits, right? If we jump, as soon as we decide to transition, if we start writing the resume, people struggle with, I don't know what to put in my resume. I don't know what to put in my profile. Well, you're right, because you don't know what you want to do. So you go back and figure out what you want to do. I think we touched on that a little bit. Figure that out, and then you can start figuring out who you need to network with. Right? If I want to be, just pick me, somewhere in the architect, engineer, construction community, doing something in that area, design, construction, whatever it is. There's an organization that's right over my shoulder here, Society of American Military Engineers. It's a cooperative between the civilian community, corporations, and the military to make sure that we're giving the best construction services to the military across all kinds of projects. And it works really, really well. And there's almost in every area, whether it's human resources, it's Society of Human Resources Management, the SHRM. If you're a project manager, Project Management Institute. There's, as I talk to different people, I do more and more research. We were talking about intel groups. We've talked about communications group. There's the Air Force, Armed Forces Communication Electronics Association, AFCEA. There's tons of professional organizations. And getting out there and learning, like John Knotts did, the language, the structure of the organization. I got to do, at one point, I was in charge of the European conference for the Society of American Military Engineers. And I remember working with different vice presidents of different companies. And I was, at the time, I think, lieutenant colonel. And I was the vice president of the Kaiserslautern post, but we were hosting the big event. And boy, I got to learn so much, because we'd sit down and have a beer at the end of the day or at the end of the conference, and we'd talk. And I'm a curious kind of guy. So I would ask questions. Tell me about what your day's like. Tell me what kind of struggles you have. Tell me how you're organized. Tell me, I would ask various questions. And I got so much information that when I decided to transition, I didn't fear that I didn't know anything. I talked to other people who've never been in touch with the association, and they just don't know how the civilian organizations are structured, how they operate, how to do different pieces. I got to lead at one point a source selection evaluation team for a $50 million contract acquisition. It was the highest level of advisory and assistance services for the organization I was in. And but that taught me a lot. So I took advantage of that and talked to contractors, et cetera. Obviously, you had to be careful on the solicitation, but I got to interact with a lot of people. And it's just getting out and getting to meet people. In fact, we're in 4 Block last night, we talked about walking into a room and you look around and you say, who can help me? And there's no tags on anybody's head that says, I'm the guy, come talk to me, right? I'm going to give you the secret to success. You got to go talk to people. So get out and just introduce yourself. Be bold, step outside your comfort zone. Hey, I'm Don Gleason. Hey, I'm thinking of transition in a year or two. I'm thinking about getting into the project management field. I would love to have a conversation with you about what you do. Can we do that? And if you quickly find that they're not going to be helpful, go find another person and another person. But if you don't step out and try it, like we said, like on the painting, right? You just got to try it, and you're going to fail, and you're going to learn. But your goal is to get to know some people and see what they can tell you, so that when you get down to that job, I can put the right things in the resume and LinkedIn that answer the questions that the hiring manager and recruiters want to see, so I can get that job. And then hopefully even maybe I have a connection to the company I'm looking to get into. That was probably my saving grace with Booz Allen Hamilton. When we were captains, a young lady, Susan Morris, who is now a senior associate, became principal within Booz Allen. We knew each other. She was working in the Pentagon. I was a director in the Pentagon, same office. I walked over to her one day and said, hey, Susan, good to talk to you. Can we have a conversation over lunch sometime? I'm thinking about getting out, and I'd love to figure out what Booz Allen has to offer. And she looked at me and says, we've been waiting for you. So So they had made a promise to the 2-star they weren't going to pinch the staff, but poach the staff. But as soon as I brought it up, we had a great conversation, and boom, the rest is history. I stayed there for 9 years. So
yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the things that I found in my career is that going to different industry events, whether they're conferences or whatever they are, where there are other people who work in that industry, getting to know those people, and it's going to be possibly more than a 1 or 2 time kind of thing. You might have to go and get in front of these people several times for your name to stick, for them to say, oh yeah, I remember this person from this time that we met, and I remember we went out for drinks after this conference, and we had a good time or whatever, and and then you start to know some of the people, and like you said, then you'll start to know the people who work for certain companies. Then they can help you get your foot in the door when you're looking to transition, get out and find that new job when you get out of the military, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
We just can't be afraid. And this is what's funny. Military people don't like to network into the civilian community. But when I talk to them and I ask, so how did you get to be whatever rank in the military, right? Senior NCO, senior officer. He goes, well, I networked around the base. I found the people. I was able to link in. I have another story where I talk about, my group commander one time calls me up, and they had forgot to assign anybody for combined federal campaign, right? The United Way. And he calls me up and he's kind of joking with me a little bit. And he finally just says, look, yeah, we forgot to assign somebody. Can you take this on? I need 50% contact by next week. And I was like, yes, sir, I'll do that. Because he knew that I had connections around the base. I was part of the company grade officers council and stuff like that. So he knew, who could make that happen. And I started, again, separated myself because I took that on. And this was the day before computers. This was the day before cell phones. And this was a phone book, right? And all you had was office symbols. You didn't have names. You didn't have a global on the computer you could look up. So you had to know where people were and figure out the number and call and, hey, trying to track people down. And it was different. But I got more than 50% by the next week.
There you go. And that's just knowing the right people. They knew you as being the right person to be able to reach out and getting in front of all these other people. So it's networking is huge. I think that is, can't be, undervalued. I think preparation, like you said before, is huge, and stepping outside of that comfort zone. You're not going to walk right into another military organization, right? When you're getting out. So it's going to be different. Just know that going into it. It just is. It's going to be different. And
different can be good.
And different can be good. And just be okay with that. Just say, okay, it's gonna not be the same. I'm not going into my military job the way I did for the last X number of years. It's gonna be different. And so what? It's different. Of course it's gonna be different because it's not what you were doing before. And that's how you progress, right? Like I said before, if you keep doing the same thing over and over, expecting a different result, you're kind of insane, right? So
that's right.
So anyways, I think all of this is really great information. I'm sure we can keep talking about this for quite some time. But I think we should probably put a pin in it here. And I want to give you the chance to let people know where people can get in touch with you and find out more about the Military Transition Roundtable, if they're looking for help in their transition.
Yeah. So just think about that. If you are afraid of that being alone as you transition, and you would love to have somebody that you can work with, a team of people, get to know them, they'd be vulnerable to you, you'd be vulnerable to them because you formed a relationship, right? And you help each other through it, and you love to be held accountable. We didn't talk about the accountability piece, but we tag everybody every week. What are you going to do in the next 2 weeks? Then we come back to, what did you do? If you didn't do it, what happened? Then we get people to think again. If that would relate to you, or other people, we would love referral. We'd love for you to contact us. So on LinkedIn, a big presence on LinkedIn. In fact, I was looking at my social selling number today, and I'm like in the top 1%. Just very active. So Don, the middle initial L in Gleason. So my partner has written several books on LinkedIn for military. And there's a lot of Don Gleasons, Donald Gleasons, all kinds. I couldn't believe it, like 30 or 40. So putting the middle initial in there, I'm the only one. So it really helps people find me quickly. So Don L. Gleason. And we also have an open page on LinkedIn, Military Transition Roundtable, 3 words. And we have over 1,000 members. And I'd love to join that, follow that. I try to post on there almost every day, probably do at least every 2-3 days. And just different topics about transition and get people to think and ask questions. And I had a post about 4 or 5 weeks ago that went to 30,000 people viewed it. And I was like, wow, that's by far my best. But it was just an interesting how it just spun. So Don L. Gleason on LinkedIn, Military Transition Roundtable on the open page, www.militarytransitionroundtable.com. Get more information about us. And you can even find us on YouTube. So again, Military Transition Roundtable, there's some videos there. But it's all about having a conversation. Connect with us. Let's get a conversation. Let's talk about your transition journey. We're not hurt if this isn't, if after we talk and we invite you to a meeting and you decide this isn't for you, hey, that's fine. Transition is a time management issue, right? You've got a job, you've got a family, you've got transition. That's why I try to focus in as clearly as we can on what we want to do next. I think I've said that now 7 or 8 times, because it streamlines your whole process. It allows time management to help you by being focused, so you can still exist in those other 2. So we just want to have a conversation with you, see if that works for you, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds great. And I think that's definitely a needed service in the military and the veteran community to help people in that transition, to help them do it successfully, so they don't fall into that category of people who are moving on to the next job within 12 months of starting that first job, right? So
and we link people to other folks that we know, to go do informational interviews, to connect with. We interview them with companies. We do American Corporate Partners. I do Veterati mentoring. We link to a lot of different people. We're not afraid of the other resources out there. We want you to take advantage of them, but we just want you to think about, what do I really need, and not try to do everything. Do the things you need and focus from there.
All that you can ask for, is just getting people out there and helping them as best as you can. So thanks again, Don, for coming on. I really appreciate you sharing what you do and your story. It's really been a pleasure speaking with you. I really appreciate it.
It's been a pleasure speaking with you, Scott, and I really appreciate, first, thank you for your service, and thank you for your focus to give back by doing these podcast interviews and thinking about what people are doing to help. And I appreciate us being one of those members that we're able to talk about it. And we just appreciate you. So thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks a lot. Thanks for listening to the Drive On Podcast. If you want to check out more episodes or learn more about the show, you can visit our website, driveonpodcast.com. We're also on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube at Drive On Podcast.